Well, good evening, worship peeps. How's everybody doing? I hope you're having an awesome Tuesday. Tonight is going to be an awful lot of fun for yours truly, and I am hoping you guys are having an awesome, awesome, awesome Tuesday. Um, Talking about tone, I am immersed in a sea of tone at the moment, and it just seemed like such an appropriate topic to kind of cover tonight. That's what I decided I want to talk about, and hopefully, I will have been on target. So I am just checking in and making sure that everything appears to be on target there. Awesome, awesome. So I am looking forward to seeing some comments tonight, and I'm hoping that everybody is going to be just kind of, just chatty, chatty. Hey, what's going on, Jesse? How are you, man? Great to see you. And tone. So, gosh, there are so many different things that make up tone. And tonight, I want to cover kind of this overarching strategy. I kind of realized that no matter what kind of sound I'm going for, I pretty much always use the same approach. So we've talked about that a little bit before, but what I wanted to do tonight was really give a chance to unpack that. With some specific examples. And I've got HX Edit set up, and I've got the Helix set up, and I've got this track set up, and I've got a video set up. And I just want to just really unpack this thing because, here's the thing is I think we're all looking for the secret to unlock tone. We all want great tone. We all know that tone is totally subjective, but we also... Awesome. Thank you, Forrest. Appreciate it. Forrest saying, hey, Doug, another great topic. Awesome. Really appreciate the positive reinforcement. We all could use more positive reinforcement. So I kind of always do much the same thing, which is this kind of stereo-driven strategy. And it's really interesting just to see how so much of what I do in mainstream and so much of what I do in when I'm setting up worship tones, it's so much alike. And then there's some stuff that I've learned from some friends and, along the way, studying with Joe Satriani, where he played in stereo for many, 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 many years. And then he played at the Oakland Coliseum, and they managed to kind of mix his stereo into mono. And Joe's comment, there's nothing like seeing Joe in a moment of kind of frustration where somebody has taken this beautiful thing that he's created and turned it into something not beautiful. It's just like, how could they, he didn't say it, but the unpacking of the look on his face was like, how could they take this beautiful stereo signal that they worked so hard to create and sum it to mono, and he was just like, never again. And since then, he's just basically played in mono. And, I've had a lot of recording over the past couple of days. Tomorrow night, 4 p.m., on Doppler's Gear Garage, we've got Alan Abbasi and Stan Cody from Fender for the first 45 minutes, and joining them in the second part of the show, and they'll hang out for a minute, and then they'll probably jettison, is going to be my dear friend Lincoln Brewster. And Lincoln and I have been on a tone journey. We're on the phone. We're kind of like high school, almost junior high school. I remember I had a guitar buddy in junior high school that we'd be on the phone talking about guitars. I used to go out to this place called Primo Music, and I dreamed about guitars, and I still do. And so Lincoln and I are on this journey where we'll let him unpack kind of what he's up to, but it's a tone quest, and it's all this crazy gear. It's around some of the stuff he's going to unpack, so I won't blow that out other than to say that I have the privilege of spending a lot of phone time with Lincoln. And we are just, I'm just so enamored to have somebody that's such a skilled, brilliant player who knows so much to kind of bounce ideas off in this moment. So in any case, what's also neat about it is I send him little clips and stuff. And, it's great to have that sounding board. It's all valuable to have a sounding board, and kind of what we were talking about, about live and online worship that rocks, being able to listen back is really valuable. That's why in this video moment, as I'm preparing some of these little videos for tomorrow night, I'm especially there. So with that said, I'm actually going to queue up this video, and I believe it's going to play automatically. Let's see if it does it. So that is my idea of having way too much fun. And so what's really interesting again is I was setting up these tones. Hang on, let me turn off the mic. That is kind of the classic approach I take for pretty much everything. I might not necessarily use quite as much snap, as much spank in a worship setting. And ironically, I have a tendency sometimes to actually use the bridge pickup in a guitar like this, which sounds a bit like this. I don't know how it's going to translate, but I think it's going to actually have a little bit less snap and top end than the neck pickup, which is kind of funny, which is where I was. And if you think there's a bit of compression going on there, you would be right. So the really interesting thing, I remember, I'm just going to kind of be a little bit all over the place tonight, so please forgive. But I remember one of my influences in my early metal days when I fully submerged into that was George Lynch from the band Dokken. Not obviously a Christian act, but all his bridge tones all his clean tones were in the bridge, and I was fascinated by that because coming kind of from a funk school, I would never think of using a bridge pickup for a clean tone. It's just like, it just, because if you think about your average funk tone, what you've got going to make it spanky in the neck, you do not want to be putting that in the bridge position for a clean sound. You'd be like, you'd be ejected from the nightclub, and you might be forcefully ejected. You just don't want to do that to people. And yes, a compressor can help, but it's still, too much top end is too much top end. So in any case, first of all, I am absolutely looking forward to some questions. Hey, David, what's going on? Great to see you, my man. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have a date with David Falscraft because he's got some amazing guitar presets for the Mac application that's completely main stage. Thank you very much, David, telepathically over the interwaves there. And I'm going to be super excited to get him on the show. He's an absolutely lovely guy. And he's the guy behind Sunday Sounds, Sunday Keys, and I guess maybe Sunday Guitars as well. But he's created some guitar patches for Mainstage that, in all honesty, I have not yet had a chance to try, but I am super excited. I'm sure I'll get in there. I'll do the exact same thing I always do, which is kind of like, guitars, here are a pair of them, and then delays, hard left and hard right. So in any case, yes, David, no, we got a date with destiny, my friend. Whatever that may mean. All right, let me poke in on YouTube and make sure that there are no comments waiting to be moderated. There we go. Okay, good. Hey, so here's the deal. First of all, questions. If you've got questions, bring them on, because, as much as I've got a lot to say about this topic, there is a lot that people sometimes are hesitant to ask. What's really interesting thing about this guitar is it's got all single coils. Ooh, sorry about that if I flashed you there. But they're noise canceling here. I shouldn't say single coils. The one in the bridge here is actually a narrow aperture humbucking pickup. So it's kind of got a blade thing going on, but you can't really see it because the blades are black. But the point being, this is not necessarily kind of my traditional dealio. In case you don't recognize this, there you go. There's the signature there. This is the Tom Morello signature Strat, and it's awesome. So if you show up for Sunday with a whammy bar that it says Floyd Rose, you might just be thrown off the platform. But at the same time, I'm loving kind of this classic Floydy kind of vibe, just that particular type of vibrato. And by the way, it's still in tune. So I love Bigsby tremolos, and they are, obviously the vibrato bar in Warship is a huge part of the vibe, right? And it's a funny thing. We don't necessarily think of vibrato bar classically when we're thinking about the actual tone per se, but it's definitely one of the ingredients that's in there. And as we, hang on a second, this is going to make a little bit of noise. There you go. Good, happy microphone. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. Testing. There we go. All right. So the idea is crafting a great tone. A pair of amplifiers not right on top of each other, and then stereo delays left and right. Classic thing. I put a dotted eighth and a quarter over there. This particular sound here is something that I dialed up for a demo that I'm doing for the Eric Johnson Stratocaster. And then I just kind of fine-tuned it a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that I did. Now, I have not yet set up the main stage scene here yet, so this is going to potentially be just a little bit messy while I choose my application. There we go. Let's see if we've got the right, there we go. So, all right, so what we've got here, and we've got my overlay going. All right, hang on just 1 second. All right, I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to be over there, and we're going to lose the overlay. Sorry about that, folks. Let's do that. There we go. And for whatever reason, we got a little blinky thing going on here, which is making the Dougster very unhappy. All right, so in any case, as you look over here, we basically have at the top of this guy, let me go into HX Edit, and you should see my mouse over that. We've got a compressor. We got the classic 2 different amplifiers, and these are basically 2 different deluxe reverbs. And what we've got is the normal channel and the bright, basically the vibrato channel, but that's kind of, it's got a bright cap on there that makes it brighter. Then it's going into my classic dual delay, and then it's going back into a kind of a 63 spring reverb. So the idea with this was to kind of hang out and kind of roll with a, okay, oh, right, we got to be out of here, got it. Okay, roll with that and have a traditional kind of a Fendery sound. So let me turn the reverb off for just the delay off for just a second, and you'll hear a little bit of the Fendery vibe coming through, muting the mic. Kind of like if I stole from Eric Johnson and Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray all at once, that's kind of where I would go. Now, there's one thing that I'm doing here with the compressor. I didn't really like the blinky screen thing we had going there a second ago, but I want to show it to you anyway because it's relevant to this conversation. So let me get over in here. So in the compressor here, one of the things that I did was I changed the ratio. Oh, interesting. This is the 6-to-1 ratio. So this isn't, this is the first version. So in the version that's on the actual kind of track that is got this dealio. That foot switch in that microphone, I got to tell you. So in any case, what I was saying was what I did there. Let me head back over to HX Edit. Gosh, dang it. So what I did there was in this. This is actually an earlier version of the preset for the Eric Johnson Dealio. For the thing that I did that you kind of heard at the top of this, I actually created a second version, and I took the compression to 10-to-1 instead of 6-to-1. And the reason I did that was it just kind of makes the guitar a little bit tamer as it's sitting there in the body of the track. And I will actually exemplify that so you can hear the difference between 6-1 and 10-1. And those little fine tuning things make a world of difference. It's so funny in that as I because I had an initial sound, I'm like, oh, that's, in my opinion, that's great. And then I started to fine tune, and I fine tuned, and I fine tuned, and then I fine tuned some more, and I was like, I'm afraid if I went back and listened to that original thing that I thought was great, I'd be like, that's terrible. So, there is a certain amount that is to be said about this whole process of, just we want to have the ability to go in and find something. And then sometimes we want to refine it. And what's great about something like a Helix is I was able to kind of go in and make my adjustments. And this is just kind of the deluxe comp, which is kind of one of the stock comps, and it's pretty close to where it was when I pulled it up with a couple of key exceptions. And a compressor, especially in Warship, Michael Pope was on the show a while back, and one of the things that he mentioned was that he's no longer doing the always on compressor thing, which was kind of a signature part of his sound when he was playing with Bethel. And arguably a signature part of everybody's tone that was influenced by Bethel, because Michael is one of the most influential and awesome Warship guitar players. So the way you use the compressor is very, very, very important. So let me start off with this compression ratio business. And I'm going to, here we are at 6-1. So we've got this deal. Going to 10-1. Now that might seem a little subtle, but the deal is that what it does is it takes a little bit of the bite off the top of the guitar. And one of the other things that I did with the way the compressor was set, I think it was originally the output of the compressor was like at 7 dB, so it was just hitting the front end of the deluxe reverbs, which are again in stereo, too hard, and it was creating this distortion that I couldn't get around. And as a general rule, tweeds sound great when they start to break up. Blackface amplifiers, not quite as much. They generally seem to sit a little bit better, cleaner. The way they kind of break up, they just get a little murky, where tweeds just get distorted because they're a different sound. So in this particular case, I heard that the compressor was really in the way, even though it was a fundamental part of the tone. So I had to bring the volume down, brought the threshold up, and then I ended up with this little dealio here, bringing the delay back on, and this is kind of the final product. And here we go. Now, that is not a particularly cavernous amount of delay for your average Warship guitar player. But what I'm trying to do is make the guitar part make the statement. And, again, when we're thinking about more of a classic blues-inspired tone, we're thinking about the sound of the amplifier. We're thinking about the sound of the guitar. Again, Eric Johnson, he's got a Dynacomp on his board. And Eric Johnson not only has an amazing lead tone, he's got an amazing clean sound, and that's a combination of an MXR Dynacomp and a TC Electronic, their beautiful chorus. And so and he's Eric Johnson, but the way he uses things and potentially out into the Echoplex or the Belle Epoque, which is kind of a take on the Echoplex. And so, he's a real master of that stuff. And so I'm always thinking kind of like, what would Eric do, And so I'm aware of the gear that he uses. I'm aware of kind of the guitar choices that he makes. And so as I begin to think about crafting something, especially with his signature, Strat, I want to be able to kind of get into that ballpark. And speaking of which, it's kind of like right over there. I'm going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to step out of frame. But I think it'll be worth it. All right, we're back. All right, let's see. All right, just the guitar. I forgot to tune it. Classic freshman mistake. Reach for the guitar and think it's going to be in tune. I'll do something about that in just a second. In any case, this guitar is just it's the Eric Johnson signature Strat. The one of them, I should say, it's the Virginia Strat. It's basically designed after, I believe, what was his '57 Strat, and it's just a great sounding guitar. All right, first of all, let me again check in and see if there's any questions, because I don't want to just ramble on without paying a little bit of hello attention to the questions that people might have. All right. Oh, awesome. Steve, thanks so much. Shane, Gear Whisperer, my dear friend. What's going on, Brett? How are you, man? I actually kind of went a little live a little bit later, but let's see here. Let me jump into this other mode so I can see all the messages as they come in. All right, there we go. All right. So in any case, just want to, again, thank everybody for tuning in. So we're talking tone tonight, and I didn't put up a message kind of announcing what we were going to be going over. What I'm talking with this flipping mic off. Hang on. That's a very lovely guitar. The interesting thing about this guitar is it's pretty darn snappy. It's got way more high end than the Morello guitar, so that's kind of one of the reasons, adding some compression in there just kind of tames things out a little bit. It's not like it's got an unpleasant high end, but the interesting thing is, if I endeavor to go over here, there we go. We got a little hissy. Hang on a second. Let me check the level here. All right, that'll work. So I'm going to play a little bit with this guy, and it's an interesting thing as you get to know different instruments. Thou shalt hiss later. You begin to. This guitar is not easy to play, but it's. I don't classically want to use the word stiffness, but I'll go there. It has a stiffness about it that when you plug it into a highly distorted tone, the guitar just keeps its backbone. It's pretty awesome. I'm going to try playing over that other track. Now I've still managed to detune this thing. All right, I got to de-stratify this thing. Strats kind of take a certain type of. It take a couple of times through, Shane, as you will know that. All right, so in any case, it's kind of a matter of hand over the 12th fret, gently stretching the strings, giving it a little bit of a vibrato thing there, letting the guitar tell you what it's telling you. The high string is going to be sharp, and then you tune it by that amount flat, and you go through again from the bottom, and then by the time you get to the high E string, it'll probably be pretty close. There we go. Good. All right. Happy days. Now, let's see what happens. So this is that same track. All right. So I don't usually do that on Sunday morning, but it's tempting sometimes. All right. So yeah, so it's each one of these guitars really has its own unique personality and kind of, as you change, it's one of the reasons I have a tendency that when I get a guitar, usually that's my main guitar, I'll get a second one that's my hot swappable backup. What's very interesting is much of the time, you go in and play two identical guitars, and they don't sound identical. What's very interesting is there are two Jazzmasters. I accidentally bought two in a mix-up in an order. I got one, And then I didn't realize kind of the other was in a box, and I kind of came to the box and I opened it up and was like, they're two identical Jazzmasters, and it was kind of the last Jazzmaster that Fender made. It's got kind of I think a seafoam green body, which is kind of one of my favorite colors in the world, and an actual rosewood neck before they went to the Pau Ferro. And they sound so much alike, it's inconceivable. I've never had two guitars like literally you could hand me one or the other, and I was like, I would not be able to tell the difference, which is rare. But generally speaking, each guitar is just totally unique, even if it, obviously there are different feature sets between these two guitars, but even with the same make and model, they sound different. It's different pieces of wood, different tree, different day. Um, Brett, I got caught up shopping for gear and lost track of time. That's funny. I love and yeah, Steve McFarland's comment. I like the clean Fender as a pedal platform. Absolutely. Drive from the amps I've never found fantastic. Generally speaking, with the exception of the Tweeds, I'm right with you. The Tweeds were basically the Bassman was the basis for the Marshall circuit. So they are Marshally when you turn them up. But when you think about the original Marshalls, they weren't kind of like this kind of high gain 5 million controls. It was a thing that you kind of had to man that a lot or woman it from the volume controls themselves. There was some work that you had to do, and if you weren't up for the task, the task was gonna get the better of you. All right, so let's see here. Now, there we go. Let's do this right here. All right, so let's see if there are any questions here. None yet. Did I hit that foot switch again? Hopefully not. Good. No, we're there. All right, good. Yeah, from time to time. So basically, what it is, I've got a shotgun up, but if I have the shotgun up with the guitar going, shotgun up and the guitar going, versus the shotgun off and the guitar going. I just got to remember to hit the switch. It's got a little red light on it, but you're there, and the switch is down there. Gosh darn it. All right, so the piece that I also want to talk about is how the parts sit against one another. I'm going to pull up the track real quick, and I want you to hear and listen for how this rhythm guitar part, and I'm going to switch guitars here, how it sits against the track with the bass. And again, it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle that because we're worship guitar players, whether we're actually playing with other musicians in this season or not, we're at a severe disadvantage compared to your average mainstream band in that they get together 4 nights a week. They drink, don't get me wrong, this is not where I was going. They drink a bunch of brews. They kind of eat some fast food together. They have this bonding experience, and then they play hours and hours and hours and hours and hours together. We don't have that experience, and so let's leave the brews part of it out. Nothing wrong with a couple of brews, but like your average rock band does more than a couple of brews. Just saying. But the idea of that kind of, we're hanging out together, we're talking about, what happened? Is that boss still giving you a hard time? There's a life dimension that happens in the midst of that, and then they get together. They've had this moment of hanging out, as opposed to like we just show up on Sunday morning and we're like, all right, we're maybe tired or or whatever, all the stuff that happens in a week, and we're there and we're just kind of like, we're just going through our parts. Where by the time your average rock band kind of gets to an actual quote-unquote gig, they've woodshedded those songs 1,000,000 times. So the sorts of mistakes that we might make on a Sunday morning, it's a very different type of set of mistakes that they're going to make. And, all bands make mistakes, even the ones that are fastidiously rehearsed. But there is a lot to be said about preparation. One of the things that Lincoln will be talking about tomorrow night is he has this acronym for PREP, and I'll let him unfold that. I'm not going to steal any of his thunder tonight, but he's an absolutely lovely guy, and he's got some serious expertise and just so much wisdom, and as a guitar player, as a musician, and one of the reasons that I can relate to him so much, or I should say, I enjoy his getting a little closer to this mic. The interaction that we have is that because he hangs out in the mainstream, with the experience of having played with Steve Perry and been in that world, and then also kind of is dedicated to the house and the heart of worship. He really speaks to me, and he's a super smart, very articulate, really studied guy. So his whole thing about prep is just be ready. When you're ready, it's a whole different headspace than when you're not ready. Imagine that. All right, so I was in the middle of playing the track. Now, so the deal is that as I'm crafting a rhythm guitar part, and I'm not just crafting a part for the sake of a part, I'm thinking about how all the pieces are going to glue together. So why the ramble about the bands and all of that? Because when you sit in a room with a bunch of other musicians playing at bone-crushing volume, you really begin to find how well your tone actually blends. I'm going to mention another band, Dream Theater. They are not the beer-drinking type, as I understand, but those are some seriously studied, very capable musicians. And the thing that amazes me about the complexity of their sound, which in many ways, if you look at worship, there's a lot of things going on, right? You've got the acoustic guitar up front, probably strumming. You've got keys. You've got what is often a 5-string bass, getting those low notes. You've got 1 or 2 electric guitar players, and you've got a drummer playing too loud. So you're trying to make all this stuff work, right? And so getting a tone that's going to fit into that little pieces, the perfect jigsaw for kind of where it works. And there could be obviously a couple of different tones and guitars that can get there. But so Lincoln is going to be on my other show, Doppler's Gear Garage, which you can get to via facebook.com/Doppler's Gear Garage or facebook.com/Doug Doppler or youtube.com/Doug Doppler. Tomorrow night, we've got the Fender guys at 4, and then Lincoln's going to be coming on at 4:45 Pacific time. PM, that is. All right, so the thing about this little dealio, let me pull up the track. And again, the idea is where the guitar sits is both volume and harmonically wise intended to sit in a very specific space. So when I'm playing a melody guitar over the top of something, the melody of the guitar is the lead vocal. And, so it's doing the same thing. So I'm kind of playing the same support role. Let's take a listen. That was me saying, now I'm going to solo the guitar and the drums. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring everything back in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to solo a couple of different things. So obviously when you hear just guitar and bass, just guitar and bass. When just guitar and drums, so on and so forth. And I'm actually going to start with, if I can get my faders set up right, it's just going to be the drums and the bass. So it's just kind of going, how do we fit around that, right? Now, I got to say it, a lot of guitar players don't think about that. They just kind of think, I got my sound. And that works until it doesn't. had the mic up after all that. All right, great. So the idea is it's kind of like a riddle that we're trying to figure out. Um, and in the process of figuring that out, we begin to figure out how all these things fit into place, right? All right. Yeah, muted again. It happens. There we go. All right. Good, good, good. All right. So the thing is that it's kind of a rare thing that we get a chance to kind of hear all the yes, we can listen to it in multi-tracks, but with multi-tracks there's so many different stems to listen to. It's very rare you can kind of go, let me just hear the guitar and the bass and the guitar and the drums and the drums and the bass and kind of go, and reverse engineer what were they thinking, right? Does Saint Pope or Kunde have kind of their signature sound? Yes. But those sounds, or for example, Daniel Carson, those sounds are generally crafted out of, there are a lot of years of working with a drummer and a bass player and having producers kind of going, that's not working. And then kind of hearing what, the producer kind of unpacks in terms of what does work, right? And so then adding those pieces together so they fit together like the pieces of a puzzle. And so here's the deal. I want some questions. Please, 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 please bring me some questions. Because it's my guess is either that or you guys know everything already. And that's not implying that I have some incredible knowledge that is special. It's just a matter of like, hey, you know what? If you got questions, bring them. Like Shane, like you got to have a question. I know you do, because you've always got a question. So in any case, so here's the thing. Picking the right guitar is about finding the sound for the part. And one of the challenges is on a Sunday morning, we're playing a lot of different songs by a lot of different artists. So we could very easily get drawn into finding a thing that sounds great with that particular multi-track. And then we then play it with our team and it's going to sound very different. And as we do that across different tracks, we somehow have to kind of go, how do we take what we're doing in our practice and rehearsal time and have it make sense with what we're doing on Sunday, right? With a different set of musicians. So we kind of have to have all that stuff in mind, which again gets back to kind of what we were talking about before. If you're recording what you're doing, you're able to hear what happens. This is the other time that it's really great to have a wireless unit. If you can get away with actually, not having to have a bunch of pedal board or model preset switches in the middle of a song, or you can find a song that you can generally use much of one tone and use your volume control to do that. Go front of house and take a listen. The other thing you can do is if you have enough time on a Sunday when we're in our places of respective worship, is ask the band to just kind of loop a section, and that'll get you there as well. Arguably, a loud section, right? So you can kind of hear what happens when the guitar is at full volume. Does it get pokey? Does it get spiky? And this is where a compressor is really kind of like a patch for a bad tire. The attack of the guitar, aka the transient, is the thing that the compressor reacts to. And basically, the transient is the fastest part of your guitar sound. And if you think about sound waves, the shorter the wave, the higher the frequency, because it's a higher number of waves per second. That's why it's a higher frequency. So the point being is that the compressor can react to that. And what it usually does is it kind of lops the top of those transients off. And that's kind of why a minute ago I was talking about the idea of going for a 10-to-1 compression ratio as opposed to a 6-to-1. Now, one of the things I was doing there was not just grabbing the transient, but I was actually just saying all the guitar signal. And, this gets back to, who was that said that? That was Steve that said that. Steve's comment was, I'm not really crazy about a black-faced sound getting overdriven. And I'm generally with you. And so what I was trying to do was make it such that the compressor was grabbing all the guitar and making it a little bit smaller. Much of the time when I'm doing a compressor, I'm just trying to lop the transient off so there's a little bit less high end. But in this particular case, I said, guitar, you're going to get a little bit smaller so that when we stuff you into those two Fender Deluxes, you're not going to take the front end of those Deluxes and have to go, whoa. And so, as much as I'm already kind of messed with the gain of the output of the compressor, now I'm messing with how much I'm actually kind of making the guitar a little bit smaller. Because that in turn means I'm trying to shove a little less information into the front end of those fenders. And that what it did was it made them drive a little bit less. Because the decision I had to make was, do I pull the drive off the front end of the amp down a little bit? I think I've got them both set at 4. And I was like, I don't really want to go any lower than 4. And ironically, a deluxe reverb doesn't have a drive control. But what's neat about Helix or any of these types of devices, you have the ability to control the drive of said amplifier. So the idea was, I'm liking just the kind of the feel of the squishiness of the breakup. I'm not talking about the squishiness of the compressor, the squishiness of the breakup in the amp. It's giving a little bit, and if I pull it back on the amplifier, I'm going to lose that little bit of squish. Basically, the modeled power amp beginning of overdrive, but more importantly, the natural compression that you get when the power amp starts to break up a little bit. It's just not quite as rigid. And conversely, what I didn't want was I didn't want the power amp, the virtual power amp in this case, to be quite as stiff. I wanted it loose such that I could kind of keep it just kind of chilled out. So the way I use the compressor here, I was really kind of like, wow, I've never used the compressor for a while in such a multiple function way, in that not only was I really kind of going after, it was like, okay, I need to fine tune the output of the compressor, but I'm also really very strategically using the compression ratio set of 6-to-1, 10-to-1, which is arguably an awful lot of compression. But what I'm doing is I'm just kind of making the signal a little bit cleaner in the process of doing that. And yes, it's taking some of the transients off the top, but I'm using it more to kind of bring things in a little bit, including the transients, but to make it just a little bit more palatable to the front end of that amplifier. That is something that is a big deal in terms of kind of going, how do you make it? You want it to be a little clean, but you want it to have a little bit of hair on it, and you're kind of like, you've kind of got the amp right, and that's where the compressor can kind of allow you to manipulate what's going on in the amplifier, and that's a big deal. All right, I see questions here, and I love that. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, that's the one thing I learned from Joe Satriani. He asked in an interview how he got his sound. He said, my sound is what fits the song, not a particular sound. This is a very interesting thing about Joe, is I had the opportunity to be in the studio with him. He called me up one day or something. He was like, hey, I'm in the studio. Want to come hang out? And I was like, okay. And what's even weirder is he invited me back a second day, which, like when I'm in the studio, I pretty much don't want anybody around. I'm just like, but it was awesome. And, the thing is that, first of all, one of the realities is that when Joe Satriani plugs in a guitar, he kind of plugs into anything, and he just sounds like Joe Satriani. So the moral of the story is, the way you hit the strings is hugely important to the way you express your personal style. Now, this is an interesting can of worms that I'm going to open up here, in that a lot of us are kind of our weekend warriors. We learn the songs, we come in and play that. When I learn a worship song, there's a certain amount that I want to do is kind of bring in some of me into it. I think we all do that on whatever level. But I think some folks kind of struggle with giving themselves permission. And I say that, kind of on the heels of what I said last week. There was a worship team that my wife and I worked with in Canada, where when I asked them, it's like, well, what's the devil in your ear about? And like basically everybody was like, it's this and that, I'm too old, I'm too fat, I don't have enough talent. I'm like, holy cow, that guy doesn't play very nice. So he's in everybody's ear, including the people that are super confident that you think, oh, they've got it all together. The devil doesn't get to them. It's like, not true. So the point being is that I think kind of the permission to just kind of be you, because, honestly, you're already being you. The real question is, which version of you are you going to be? The kind of like, well, I'm just going to kind of come up and play the parts, or I'm just going to kind of like, I'm hearing that I want to do this, and I'm not talking about taking an overly extensive artistic interpretation and taking it someplace that maybe is inappropriate for the moment. I know that we're talking within general scope of reason, but when we're actually talking about kind of creating something that just feels a little bit more lifelike, we actually have to inject ourselves into the situation sometimes, and that takes a type of confidence, which again gets back to the rehearsing, which is why I like to rehearse so much before I like to practice so much before I rehearse, because when I come into rehearsal, I've had a chance to flesh some of the ideas out that I'm kind of injecting stuff into, and I kind of go, you know what, this worked at home. I think I'm ready to try this at rehearsal. And sometimes I'll ask people for feedback, but much of the time I already have done enough things that are unique in a way that's not detracting but attracting, that it works. And I think part of that is again the practice, the practice, and then with the limited amount of rehearsal, we get a chance to try it at rehearsal and kind of go, and you kind of slide it in there, and you kind of look around, see if anybody gives you one of those, what was that, versus people like, it's a funny thing. Sometimes you just want them not to notice. And honestly, most of the time, people are so under-rehearsed, they're so just kind of in their own instrument. Sad reality. But reality just the same. Okay. I have comments here. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Okay. Henry Sue. Hello, Henry. Are you looking to tweak the compressors to compress the high-frequency transients or as general compression? And what are you playing for leads is typically... hang on a second. And what you are playing for lead is already typically high frequency already. Yes, I mean so if I'm reading that right, when the further you go up the neck, the higher the frequencies get, and so yep, most of the time in worship, when I use a compressor, I simply use it to lop the transients off the top of those notes. That's all I'm thinking. Because, the thing about an AC30, which is kind of my go-to worship amp, whether it's a model or whatever, the bottom end is this murky kind of distorted thing. It's not crisp and clear and all of this. It's murky. But the top end's got this chime. So I don't really want to mess with the thing that makes an AC30 so cool. You got this chime that's going on, this bell-like thing, but at the bottom it's kind of murky. I remember seeing it's so funny. Stone Temple Pilots reunion tour. Obviously not a Christian band, but I just remember the guitar player was using a combination of a Marshall and an AC30. And I was like, and with a Les Paul, and I was like, it was both those amps doing their thing, and I don't know whether he was switching out a little bit, but the sound that I was hearing when I was losing my mind in a very positive way was the combination of the Marshall and the AC30 together. I was like, because the AC30 was all messy on the bottom. The Marshall has NCB, kind of a higher gain. Newer Marshalls a little bit tighter on the bottom. The vintage Marshalls are not super tight on the bottom end unless you're running them clean. And so the point being, like, you don't hear people doing 16th note metal on vintage Plexi Marshalls. That's just not the deal. But those two amps together, they really complemented each other so well. And just the guitar, I think what I love about delay and overdrive and compression is it gives this guitar this explosive quality, right? So you hit the note, the transient doesn't lop your head off, and then there's enough drive that goes, whoa. Compressor has enough grasp of it that it doesn't open up too much, and then the delay just goes, whoosh. Love that, right? That's probably where that expression came from. They were actually talking about guitar sound when they invented like fist bump. Yeah, that's my tone. I humor myself, obviously, but the point being is that dimension is what I'm trying to do. All right, Paul Richard, how are you, my friend? Long time no see. Hey, Doug, great topic. Question: how do you find / adjust your guitar tone to what the church congregation is used to hearing versus what you're used to hearing? Great question. Boy, Pandora's box there. Hey, there's more. Hang on a second. Let me open this up here. Love this. Okay, let's take a look here. Especially when you get the famous 24-hour notice call like, hey, we need a guitar player for Sunday worship. Not my favorite, but it happens. Okay, that's a great question. Um, so here's the thing. Um, I'm just rereading this because it can be read a couple of different ways, and I'm going to answer it a couple of different ways because there's two great questions in there, even though you potentially meant one. That is to say, there's some church somewhere that the guitar player had to work on Sunday or had to take care of a family member, go to Little League with his son, awesome, or daughter. And they're like, we need a guitar player, and you're the poor soul that shows up, not knowing the church, not knowing how they do stuff, and just kind of going, I don't know. Great question. So here's the easy part. And because we're friends, I can say this, and it's not going to. Just everybody knows that it's not me being snarky. It's like they've got this thing called the internet, and guess what? For better or for worse, it's highly probable that church is streaming their church service. And, mind you, you might actually go, why did I say yes? They're terrible. Which means you get a chance to hopefully go in and make it better. And it's not like I have a negative attitude. It's just like, if we're under rehearsed and under practiced and we don't, have personal practice time with our own instrument, we don't necessarily, the Holy Spirit's going to show up and do their thing. But God, how do I say this without sounding wrong? There's a difference between what God does and what you're supposed to do. Like, we got our part. Know your instrument, know the songs, know the parts, know your place, and know what kind of is your lane, right? We're not doing Eddie Van Halen eruption in between the second and third song most of the time. So the idea is we got our part, right? God's going to do his business. To him much is given, much is required. So the idea is when you get a chance to watch them, kind of see what their guitar player is doing. Much of the time, we walk into a situation where your instincts about, hey, you know what, I'm just going to play it the way I know it. Most of the time, I kind of learn the parts off the record or some kind of blending of the multiple parts. I'm good with that. And that has always served me really well. More often than not, churches are really looking for somebody who comes in, thank you, whoever that was, somebody who comes in and knows the material and just comes in, okay, first and foremost, knows every song arrangement-wise in the keys that they're presented. They walk into either a midweek rehearsal or just Sunday morning run through, and they're just like, okay, I'm ready. That means you were paying attention to what was going on in Planning Center. You're prepared for the fact that they may not be actually having any designation of what the form is because they have, quote unquote, their form, which is all up here and it's never communicated, which means you're walking into that situation going, I don't know. I don't know what the form's going to be. I wasn't told. So, one, that means that we can be a little bit proactive such that we don't look silly. It's not about like, I don't want to look silly. That's not what I'm saying. But we don't want to look silly on Sunday morning. So the idea is you reach out, if you get into PCO sooner than later and you kind of go, I'm seeing nothing about the forms. Message the worship leader, or worship pastor, worship creative arts director, and going, is there someplace that I can find the forms? Because there are many churches like they just kind of do it the way they do it. And some churches kind of like they just kind of free flow. All good. But knowing everything that you can know before you walk into that room is the gig, so to speak. So the idea is that most of the time somebody's going to be able to tell you about the actual, the actual form. And that may actually be a matter of the worship pastor or the worship leader for that particular week having to take a moment and chart it out. But most of the time, they're very happy to do that because it means the person on the other end of that email wanted to know the forms. Here's the other part of it. It's half the time. There's going to be a YouTube video in the wrong key. Planning Center, I don't know if it's in the current version. I think it is. has a transposition tool. You kind of have to have privileges inside Planning Center to do that. I don't know if you can set up kind of a free account separate from a church. I used to know this. I apologize. Where you can get in and do the transposition, but they also used to have a kind of an online version of it where you could just go in and dump in like an audio file. So there is 4K video downloader where you can go to YouTube, grab a video, and then parse out the audio and bring it in there. Okay, I'm not talking about heisting stuff, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm not talking about sharing it out on whatever. What I'm talking about is actually then taking that piece of audio and then transposing it to the key, so you actually have a snowball's chance of playing that song correctly in the right key. There's nothing worse than trying to rehearse in the wrong key. It's a nightmare. And a lot of churches, like, for whatever reason, and I won't go into those, choose to just put up a YouTube video. I will, because it's easy. That's great. Bad reason to not actually put the song up in the actual key, by the way. But the thing is that it will tell you a little bit about the culture that's there. Now, people are busy, but the thing is that you have to make some strategic choices when leading a team. Resource your team, and you will have a better resourced team, which means then there's some accountability. You're like, hey, you don't know the material. Had it in the right key. You made a lot of noise about me putting up these YouTube videos. I listened. And what's going on with you? Is there something, we can talk about, or is it that, once I actually gave you the materials, you didn't use them? Let's talk. Right? The point being is like, we don't want to accuse people. We want to find out, maybe there's stuff going on with them. That always happens. Family, COVID, there's a ton of stuff that can be going on. But we also, accountability helps people be held accountable. It's good. It's why people have a gym accountability partner. They go together, and guess what? They actually go together. Go figure. Okay. So it's a great question. So the one part about kind of like, because I've done that. There's a church in the peninsula that used to call me a bunch and then doesn't anymore. But the point being is that they really just kind of wanted me to show up and be me. And they were really happy about that. And I was always prepared, and I always knew things, and I asked some questions just because I was like, hey, do you mind if I do this little tag here? And, I always did my very best to bring my very best. Great question. All right. Hello, Tammy. How you doing? Blessings to you and Merced. All right. Steve McFarland. There we go. Generally less defined tones with less bite. I just have a preset ready that go to that works. I love it. If it's too crispy, snappy, it can get in the way of the vocals. Brett, I have a patch. I use like that. It's go to do anything patch that covers a lot of ground. I have a couple of others just like that with a few variations. That's a great idea. Works great anywhere I go. I love that. Paul, glad that was a help. A little bit of a monologue on that, but again, it's a mixed bag sometimes, and you're walking into somebody else's situation, and obviously, we never want to complain. It's just like, hey, now here's one of the other things that's interesting is like when you kind of are a regularly invited guest to someplace, it also gives you the opportunity to sometimes say, hey, you know what? The YouTube videos, it makes it really hard for me to be thoroughly prepared. I'm kind of curious why you aren't, transposing the songs into PCO in the keys that you're going to do it. And ultimately, kind of what I used to do was I had a spreadsheet. I discovered the vocal range, and I tested the vocalists to see what their vocal range was. We picked keys for all the songs that were in rotation based on the worship leader, and then there were charts and MP3s transposed to those keys such that when I rostered a worship leader, I could choose the right version of that chart and that audio track such that everybody was on the same page. And guess what? It made my life a lot easier. It made the worship leader's life a lot easier. It made the worship team's life a lot easier. It took a little tiny bit of heavy lifting at the beginning and made life a lot easier. Like the amount of energy it took me to do that and the amount of return on investment, just night and day. Um, Chris, Chris Kettlewell, and somehow it became Kiss. Uh, why try to adjust tone to what the congregation is used to hearing? Well, I'm gonna jump into that. I find I tend to play quite a different tone to what lots of other guitar players play in church. Rocking up with my humbuckers and into my Mesa Boogie, set of single coils into a Fender or an ACO. This is getting fun. Seymour. Then I play quite differently also. People tend to really enjoy the difference I bring. Awesome. Obviously, you want to play things that fit with the songs and such, but you don't need to change who you are to try and be like someone else. So, Chris, first of all, the heart behind your comment is right on target. I mean, this is like, it's the one. I don't want. I don't want my take on some of these things to come across as sounding critical or whiny or soapboxy because it's not really my heart. As I've gotten older, I've had a lot more grace about this stuff. That said, when you've got people depending on you, there are people depending on you. Not necessarily the time to just kind of, do this when the need is really there. It's kind of like what we're talking about, finding the need. So first of all, I love, this whole kind of like Les Paul and worship. It's like, yeah, into a boogie, even better. Like, the idea is we don't have to be carbon copies. And, arguably, one of the complaints is like, oh, I'm going to be a worship guitar player. I'm going to buy a Telecaster. I'm going to timeline, and I'm going to get a Big Sky, and I'm going to get a blah, blah, blah compressor, and I'm going to have a little pick tin with Altoids on there, and my skinny jeans. Well, I guess not anymore. But the point being is like the like conforming, and we honestly, everybody wants to fit in. I feel that. But at the same time, kind of like, do we all have to look and sound the same? No. We want to celebrate our differences, especially, you get Michael, Jeffrey B. Scott is kind of, one of the writers for the magazine. He's a worship guitar player in the greater Nashville area. Used to be Lincoln Brewster's 2IC, second in command. Played rhythm guitar for Lincoln and basically was Lincoln's right hand. Great guy. And one of the things he said, years ago that, really stuck out to me is like, look, if the one guy's playing single coils, the other guy maybe should be playing humbuckers. The one guy's playing humbuckers, the other guy should be playing single coils. The idea is you get on the phone with the other guitar player and go, what are you playing this weekend? And you have these conversations. And it was really, it wasn't one of those conversations that to this day has stayed with me because it was filled with so much practical preparatory wisdom. And he's a great guitar player and a great guy, but more importantly, he's got a great heart. He's just like one of those guys you're like, nicest guy in the world. But at the same time, a total pro, which is why, Lincoln doesn't have just anybody doing that. So, the thing, about the kind of what they're expecting. So the other side of this is that there are some worship pastors, and this is kind of the idea of where sometimes we're in a situation where we're intended to bend a little bit. And in the process of doing that, we're learning some things about humility. And I'm not saying this to you, I'm saying this to myself. So let me be really clear. Where God's just kind of going, you know what, you need to be a little bit more flexible. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you. And it's not necessarily going to feel great, but at the end, you're going to get it. I'm like, okay, I can do that, And sometimes I'm aware of it going into it, and sometimes I'm not. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to conform to this situation because that's what's being asked of me. And I know that's not the heart of your question. I totally get that. But in so doing, we then have the opportunity to kind of go, okay, I'm gonna be the Telecaster timeline Big Sky player that this guy's asking for. What am I going to learn in the process of doing that? And that always excites me. I'm always a fan of kind of going, hey, what are some of the benefits that I'm going to learn as I'm being shaped? And that's always a good thing. arguably my worst church experiences have been the ones that shaped me the most. Kind of works like that, better or worse. Great question, though, and lots of legs on that. And so great thoughts. Oh, look at this. And I love seeing you guys comment to each other as well. I also want to go back to that concept of what the congregation is used to hearing. You know, um, one of the reasons they would invite me to play at that church in the South Bay was because I was not necessarily what the congregation was used to hearing. But I will say, I think there were times that I was, if I were totally honest, maybe a bit of a distraction. Like that was right around the time that I was doing the Guitar Hero thing, and so I was a little bit of a name, and like it's kind of like that. First of all, if I'm the other guitar player on the team, it's like, oh, Doug's coming this weekend. It's just like I'd be like, and then I invariably I would always hold these guitar clinics for like 20 guitar players that are on the team, and I'm always there to serve, but I'm also where it's like I wonder how that the guy that was the quote unquote first chair guitar player on that team felt when Doug showed up, right? If I'd been that guy, I would have been, Doug, let me help you load in. I'm not rostered, but like, is there anything I can do? Let me show you where the cables are. Here's where the power is. Is there anything I can get you? Food's over here. That's what I would have done. And I'm not saying, when I was rostered, obviously it was weak when the other guitar player wasn't available. But the thing is, I'm also aware I was like, oh, Doug's here. It's like, I totally get that. I'm like, and so I think that's hard for people to navigate sometimes. In any case, oh, this is so funny, Steve McFarland. Yes and no. Younger congregations are not going to appreciate 80s sounds, but 50 somethings will. Serve your congregation. So, that's an interesting thing because I'm kind of in a moment of rediscovery as a guitar player, and I'm kind of looking back at all the different things that I've done over the years, and kind of going, there's things that I did in the 90s that I think there are people that, as I'm kind of beginning to write material for another instrumental record, there are people that are going to appreciate that. And, it's an interesting thing being a little bit older when I meet people on a worship team that are kind of older rockers that kind of got saved and, they really love some of that stuff. So it's I have to be very mindful of kind of who the room is, right? If the room is a bunch of millennials, they do not want to hear me do Eddie Van Halen. If everybody is over 50, they might just get away with a minute of eruption and just love it, right? It's knowing the room. I think that's really what it comes down to, and also being attuned to where the Holy Spirit's leading you, right? That's what's great about being steeped in prayer. You're that much closer to God. Boogies, this is Brett. Boogies are very versatile amps, despite their reputation for high gain. That's the thing is, you say boogie, people immediately, oh, he's bringing a dual rectifier. It's like, no, that's not. They are incredibly versatile amps that can do nearly any genre well. Not only well, agreed, but exceptionally well. The Lone Star, the clean channel will get dirty and the dirty channel will get clean. That is one of the best amps ever, which is why a guy like Andy Timmons doesn't leave home without one. Just saying. All right. Replying to Chris, this is Paul Richard. Great questions. Chris, I've had the worship leader come over and adjust. Wow. Wait a second. All right, Paul, you got to follow up and say this. Are you saying that he actually, he or she came over and adjusted them without saying anything, or was there a conversation? You got to unpack that. Oh, I got to read this whole thing. So this is great question. Chris, I've had the worship leader come over and adjust my effects, tone settings so as not to distract the congregation from worship. Okay. The concept of not distracting the congregation, totally get it. The coming over and adjusting them, I was like, woo. Admittedly, I love the tone, but it would have been a distraction. I was very thankful the worship leader did that for me. Hope that helps. Okay. All right. Cool. It helps to read the whole question now, doesn't it? There are some folks that are overly controlling, just saying. And there are some folks that are like, dude, I know you love that timeline and the big sky, but like, you know, we want people to actually think we're in the same room as you are, as opposed to like the other end of the Grand Canyon. So they can be over the top, but the concept of somebody coming over and touching my gear, ooh, just saying, Chris. Mine isn't a Recto; it's a Studio 22. Love it. Generally play with the Helix now. Awesome, but I'm still looking at getting that sort of amp sound. It cuts through the mix well and gives a great sound. It sits nicely in the mix. There you go, so that people can hear it. Can hear and gives great sound. So it's nice so people can hear what the guitar is playing without having to turn it up massively. That all right. That's the other thing about compression that's really cool, is that, and okay, got to do a little bit of the reveal here, is that I read Paul's comment. Um, so one of the reasons that I use compression in worship is that it basically makes the loudest things quiet and the quietest things louder. And it is in some ways, and I'm going to say this with the right heart, we work on teams with volunteers, but sometimes the volunteers, kind of what we were doing is we were listening to the different elements of the mix. As I'm mixing things, I'm like, is the bass a good relative volume to the kick drum? Once the bass and the kick drum are a good relative volume, where's the snare sitting? Hi-hat. Is it ambient enough, or is it too present? Do I need to add a little bit of reverb to the hi-hat, to the whole drum mix, just to make it kind of, I've got the balance between the kick drum and the snare right and the bass, but the hi-hat's just a little pokey. Feels too there, but I like the volume of it. I'm going to add a little bit of reverb to that. Now the drums and the bass are kind of sitting on their own, and I'm thinking about how all those pieces are there. Your average volunteer worship front of house person doesn't have that type of strategic training. It's just kind of, honestly, if we were to blame anybody, it would be church culture of kind of like, hey, let's do a quick rehearsal on Wednesday and show up and run through it on Sunday, and we're there. It's like, until we change the culture, all we can do is complain about it blindly, because we just kind of keep doing the same thing. And I'm not talking about having a bad attitude. I'm actually just kind of going, you know what? We'd be a lot better if we actually had a Saturday or some day that, like, once every fill-in-the-blank period of time, we actually got together and really rehearsed these songs, because guess what? The worship would be that much better, and people would actually know their stuff, and it allows us to have, little breakout things. The vocalists can actually go have somebody show them the parts. You can find out actually who it is that does and doesn't sing in tune. So you know who it is that does and doesn't sing in tune. Then you bring everybody together. You workshop the songs. You actually can loop the entire verse together and kind of go, the worship leaders, when we come down in volume, you rush. We're going to bring the click up so you can hear the click. And we're going to know that you're not turning it down in your phones. That's how that stuff gets fixed. It doesn't get fixed mysteriously. Oh, maybe we'll get better by not doing anything to get better. I'm just saying. Like, we live in this thing that I fortunately wasn't the only person to call it. It's the worship bubble. We somehow think that, like, just by doing the smallest, and I'm getting emotional. I'm going to say it, the most pathetically minimal amount of preparation that any group of live performing musicians I've ever seen have done, and go, hey, what do you think? And, it's like, anoint us. It's just like, it's kind of like, it's embarrassing. Honestly, if you've ever played in a mainstream band and actually know what it is to actually really rehearse, what we do is embarrassing. And somehow it's become the norm. And I understand people are busy, but the kind of like, why we're doing it, it's about that person that's coming into church. Maybe they're hungover. Maybe there's some sort of abuse in the home. Any number of things. And we're just kind of like, yeah, midweek rehearsal. Yeah, we don't need it this week. We can fake it. Yeah. All right. Hang on just a second. Just a second here. All right. Brian talking about being a servant leader. There we go. Yep. Humility is our greatest asset. Absolutely. I keep learning that lesson over and over. Paul, yes, he came over and turned the distortion level down without asking. Oh boy, he's a good friend. Not as good a friend after that. I'm kidding. And there was trust, so it was no worries. Um, it's always, just in case you're wondering, like any of you had dogs. Just because the dog is your friend does not necessarily mean you want to come over and pull a bone out of its mouth. Do not walk over, just as a general rule. If there are any worship leaders listening, going, "Oh, great, I can just go over," and it's like, do not expect a great result if you just walk over to your guitar player's pedal board and go, "Oh, let me turn that down. I think you have too much gain. Let me adjust that for you." It's like, it's like, oh, really? I'm having a bit of a chuckle. Then Paul, I haven't played guitar for him since then. Just kidding. Brian, love you, bro. Brett, preach. Steve, I agree that our standards for rehearsal are set low in general. That said, personal practice is different from rehearsal, and that, here's and this is the reality of it is that usually the worship leaders show up pretty prepared. And so the good news is, you know, generally worship drums, there's not like a huge amount going on. So if they can kick, the snare drum on 2 and 4 and play it, with the click at the right tempo, most of the stuff is going to work, which it'll be good, with a relative amount of dynamics. But when it comes to the people that knowing the chordings and the arrangements, I thought I put you on kind of standby mode there. Um, of knowing those things in the arrangement. Hey, that'll stop that. Um, we want to be prepared for everybody. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. Uh, to think we offer people more than we offer God with our time and our talents is bold to think. Would be pleased with that approach to worship. Honestly, this is the thing is that, there's this whole concept of first fruits, right? And, honestly, a lot of this is just a matter of good teaching. I got saved through a church planting movement called C3, Christian City Church. They're out of Australia, and they're kind of a sister church of Hillsong. And my wife is from Australia, and she'd come over from Hillsong. She used to be on the team, sang background vocals with Darlene. And so, there were people who would come over from Hills that would kind of come over. A guy named Ian Fisher, who was the guy that was basically the pastoral care guy to the worship team there. And honestly, you may not have heard of him, but the work that he did to set into the DNA that was reflected by Brian and Bobby and Darlene and the people that are on that team really, solidified caring for your team. And those guys work. There's a reason that they're Hillsong. They didn't get their, sleeping in on Wednesday. But the point being is the heart of worship, the heart of why we do what we do, the heart of bringing our first fruits to God, because we understand that it's not about us, it's about what we want to do, such that, what we're doing doesn't get in the way of what God's trying to do. And that, let me be clear, we can't prevent God from doing what he's doing. But if the worship's out of tune and bad and unprepared and unrehearsed and sloppy, and or I show up and I don't know the chords and I'm hitting, clangers and the poor worship leader's just trying to find their note and they're just like, and I also, I was on a team with a guitar player, just like, you could just tell, he's kind of playing some little noodly little notes up here. You're like, still doesn't know the songs. Just kind of would find the approximately the key. What key are we doing that in today? That was the classic question. I was just like, how about a little work? And their work was at their job. And the thing is, like, I get that, but if you're going to be on a worship team, bring the goods. It's just like it matters. It really does matter. All right. Are there any comments on YouTube here? Let's take a look there. Hey, Brandon, much appreciated. Thank you. Really, really, really appreciate it. Awesome. Okay. So at 7:27, we've been in here for about an hour and a half. I was initially planning on going an hour this evening because I've got some stuff I need to do. But this has been an excellent session, and I really appreciate all the people that come and hang out. We are working on, as I mentioned, the Nigel session, but because of the release date of the next issue of the magazine, it may get pushed back from the 8th of September to either the 15th or the 22nd. But that will be announced with plenty of time. In the meantime, tomorrow night, if you're not doing anything, invite you to come over to hang out at Doppler's Gear Garage, 4 p.m. Pacific. Facebook.com/Doug Doppler, Facebook.com/Doppler's Gear Garage, YouTube.com/Doug Doppler, and we're going to have Stan Cody and Alan Abbasi from Fender, and then 45 minutes in, the one and only Lincoln Brewster will be joining us, and we are going to be having a hoot of a good time. It's kind of a mainstream show. That doesn't mean we're being naughty, but we're going to be talking about gear, and we're going to be talking about Lincoln's forthcoming instrumental record, and we're also going to be talking about some of the time that he spent with Steve Perry, and invariably worship will come up because I don't hide who I am or what I do, but kind of noting that's kind of a mainstream kind of a show. Just in the same way, I'm not running through a Motley Crue song here. I don't play much Motley Crue, to tell you the truth. In fact, I think I could say no, maybe I tried to play Looks That Kill once. I was going to say I can't actually think that I've ever actually tried to play a Motley Crue song, but I would not want to be dishonest with you because that would be inappropriate. In any case, we're going to have a lot of fun. Lincoln and I have been geeking out on gear, and he is taking gear geeking out to a whole different level. So I'm going to totally bait that hook. We are going to have a hoot of an amazing time. So hopefully I'll be able to see you then. And otherwise, I'll see you here next Tuesday night. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to hang out, and I hope that has served you. And, kind of as we step into this next phase of the show, we're going to start to kind of have little departments where every week there's going to be certain things we're going to cover. So I'm excited about that, but I'm also excited to go freeform in a longer form, kind of talking about an open topic like tone. And I really, really appreciated your questions about kind of like walking in with the sound, with the arrangements and all of that. Honestly, that's kind of, if I could live one place, arguably most as a worship guitar player or whatever the heck, that place where I can help people kind of navigate some of this stuff is probably my favorite place to play. And that, I think, almost includes the platform, right? Because when you're helping other people with their journey, it's kind of like a flower and pollen, right? The bees come down and then they kind of fly off. It's a really special thing. All right, you guys. Henry, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And Paul, thank you. Much appreciated. Brett, thank you so much. And everybody, you have my heart. What can I say? We get a chance to do this together. Wishing you a phenomenal, phenomenal week. And, it's going to be fun. And, it's a strange time. But, Lord, I just pray for everybody that's out there right now. Pray for their families. I pray that the things that you're challenging them around, Lord, you would reveal yourself as to where you are in the challenges, where the world is and all the stuff that happens, and the distinction between the two, such that, providing people maybe some clarity of kind of like, hey, you know what? This is what I want you to see in this season. This is what I want you to learn in this season. And such that we all kind of come out of this wiser and bolder in the Lord, closer to the heart of God, and hopefully better able to serve our congregations and our families and our communities, and that we don't, in the midst of all the noise, miss that still, quiet, beautiful voice and that spot that we get a chance to hang out with you, and that you speak to us as only you can. And I pray that maybe each of us kind of, Lord, it's so funny you put that "Speak to Me," that Tommy Walker song, in my head and my heart just now, and it's just like I will endeavor to spend some time with that. And Lord, I just pray that everybody that is so moved tonight will find a song that they can just kind of relax in the Lord, and that you will speak to them powerfully in spirit and in whatever way that you want to reach people, Lord. But we give thanks that we have a Lord that is there with us, very present, um, and just just you just never fail us, Lord. And to be able to minister through our instruments and our voices and our hearts um, with you, and to be part of this is a very special thing, and I just thank you for that privilege. And I just pray that you encourage everybody that's listening tonight, that's praying tonight, and I just pray that you help them overflow, even if they're not in a season of overflow, Lord. I just pray that you prepare their hearts and their minds and their memories of what overflow is, and set them on that course. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. All right, you guys and gals, have a great night.